to join us in the October 10th, 2016 Board of Education work session meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please, and request a roll call.
Mr. Newmoff.
Here.
Ms. Kalinowski. Here. Mr. Dara.
Here.
Mr. McClellan.
Here.
President Cole.
Here, we are all assembled. Therefore, would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Now, as we move on to approving our agenda for this evening, I'll ask first if there are any additions or corrections to the agenda.
President Kohler, in your folders, board members, we're adding an executive session this evening after the work session. There should be a second handout directly behind tonight's agenda that shows you the addendum with recommendation to have an executive session.
Are there any other changes? No? Okay. Any questions about the agenda? If not, could we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. And a roll call, please.
Ms. Kalinowski.
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff.
Yes.
Mr. Dara.
Yes.
Mr. McClellan.
Yes.
President Kohler.
Yes, and that item passes, and it moves us directly into discussion items. We have two items to discuss this evening. The first is the first reading of our 5-year forecast, and the second is a follow-up to our previous discussions regarding the 2016-17 continuous improvement plan. Mr. Sawyers.
Actually, it's
Oh,
Jenkins.
Ms. Jenkins.
Unless he wants
I get to help answer questions, remember?
Yes, you do. Good evening. This is the first reading of the 5-year forecast. I'm going to go through some slides, and I'm sure we'll have discussion about them. So our revenue for fiscal 17 is estimated at $60.4 million, with 85% of that coming from local taxpayers, which is not unlike any other year. The things that we have included the major assumptions in the forecast. We have real estate. What I've done is worked with the city to come up with the values they have on all of the abatements that the agreements that are in place. And as those abatements expire, those values then go on our tax duplicate as new construction. As a part of that agreement is that there's an offsetting income tax sharing reduction. So there are two different lines affected in the forecast, but real estate is the main line. The offset right now is not dollar for dollar. So as those abatements expire, based on the value that I have from the city, we'll actually see more real estate dollars than we lose income tax sharing dollars. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I've worked with them to get those values and have worked that into the 5-year forecast. Again, the risk on that is that those values don't hold true. A lot of times when companies, when the abatement expires, companies oftentimes file complaints with the Board of Revisions to have those values reduced. We typically fight that, but you don't know how that's going to come out. So just throwing that caveat out there. The other piece that I have in the forecast that is the same as what we had in May is that I do have in the years beyond the current biennial budget, so next year and beyond, a 5% increase in state aid. The other thing that you might notice if you're looking from May to October is that we've also been seeing some fiscal year 16 adjustments from the state, so we've actually gotten a little bit of a bump. About $100,000 there. So they just continue to work through. We actually also had a fiscal 15 adjustment. So, but have updated the 5-year forecast to include that state aid. The other piece that we saw an increase in May was $117,000 increase for catastrophic cost reimbursement. Sheila Saunders and I worked through looking at all of our high need students and submitted those costs to the state and were approved for $117,000 in reimbursements of those costs. I've held that constant in the forecast because we expect to continue to do that. The risk on that is just not knowing the number of high need students and the severity of that catastrophic cost. But I do believe it's reasonable to assume we will at least receive that. Then the all other revenue line, that's where you would see the reduction for the abatements coming off in the years that they expire. I did reset the income tax sharing. We were supposed to receive about $5.1 million last year. At the end, we ended up receiving about $6.3 million. So I've reset the base and then reduced. So an increase for that, but then started reducing based on those things that we saw last May, where we had the one company that filed updated income tax reports asking for reimbursement there. And then I do not have any future levies modeled at this time. Any questions on revenue before I move on?
Just real quick, just to clarify, so your income tax sharing is showing up in all other revenues, line one?
That's where that's reported for the state. On the monthly financials, we always break that out separately to show the income tax sharing, but what we have to report to the state, this is the line that has to go in.
Okay, thanks.
So then expenditures, salaries and benefits are still our major expense, service industry, so we're at about 81% in those areas, which is consistent with the May forecast. The major assumptions there is that we have a zero base increase for the current year. The steps did return, and when I say return, I don't mean that the one that was given up was given back, but we just started moving forward again. But that happened this year. In fiscals 18 through 21, I have a 1% base increase. Just for planning purposes, that's the same percent base increase that has been in the forecast in May and even the previous October. Fiscals 18 through 21, I also have the 5% insurance cap, premium cap, that is in the negotiated agreement as well. One thing I want to talk about there is that that actually is a good thing because we had a really tough year with claims. And our original estimate on an increase is 23.7%. We're working with both insurance committees to try to get that figured out. We're hoping to have some decrease, but I don't know that it will decrease that much. So we're trying to work through that because the employee will pick up the amount of local money. The other expenditures, the projected expenditures, is in fiscal 17. We have 3 new buses, 2 vans, and a car. That is up from the last forecast in May because we applied for the AEP grant. So May forecast had 1 new bus, 1 van, and a car. We now have 3 buses, 2 vans, and a car. And then in fiscal 18, 2 new buses, 2 vans, and a car. And in May, we had 1 bus, 1 van, and a car. We're trying to do more with the vans because we have some routes that it would be more economically advantageous to use the vans instead of full-size buses. And not just during the day, but also for extracurricular activities as well. We do expect to receive, based on the AEP grant that was approved, $102,000 reimbursement for those 5 buses over that 2-year period. Fiscal 19, we have 1 new bus, 1 van. That did have 2 buses and no van, so we did move 1 of those buses into the fiscal 18 year. Fiscal 20 is 1 new bus and 21 is 1 new bus. As I've said in previous forecasts, if we don't need the buses, we won't buy the buses, but we will keep that money set aside for some of those capital needs that may jump up, like a new track, right, Mr. Sawyers?
Exactly. So Mrs. Honecker is sitting in the audience. So board, if I may, these are projected for transportation. They're based upon actual need, Mrs. Honecker.
You do get to have the 5 in fiscal 17 and 18.
I just want to clarify one thing or expand upon what Ms. Jenkins said related to usage of the van. The van, if it's enacted within the school district, is specifically for students with special needs. It will not become a regular route for students. So I don't want anyone having a misperception that we're introducing vans into bus routes within the community. That's specifically for students with special needs to meet specific transportation requirements in lieu of outside transportation services that cost significantly more than us trying to actually purchase the van and hire a driver for the van, which is cheaper than outsourcing the transportation to the private company for the student with special needs.
How many vans do we have now?
3.
And what, where are they in their life cycle?
One was purchased last year. Another one was picked up today, I believe. Did you go get it? All right, so we wrote the check today for the one that's allowed to be picked up. And the other one is probably plus or minus 10 years old.
So do you see one of these 4 vans being replacement and the
No,
other
it's
3?
addition.
They're
So we see
also
these currently as addition. The van should go at least 15 years in the current projection for life cycle based upon the mileage. So we believe that even the 10-year-old van has at least 5 years to go as an asset within the school district. So these are in addition too. And then after school, they become available for coaches. Golf, cross country are the 2 top users of vans within the school districts, and tennis. The coach, actually, if he or she has a van permit, is permitted to drive the van in lieu of a bus.
How many students on a van?
Up to 8, correct, Linda? 8 plus the driver. But that only happens in our current state for athletics. The special needs transportation has no more than 3 students currently in a van based upon specification of the IEP.
So then we move on to the new staffing projections. This is for planning purposes. I did meet with Mr. Sawyers after the Finance Review and Reporting Committee meeting. And so in fiscal 18, we have 10 certified staff, 1 administrator, 6 classified. The 1 administrator is new from May. In fiscal 19, we have 6 certified, 1 administrator, 4 classified. There's 1 certified and 1 administrator that is new from the May forecast. In fiscal 20, we have 6 certified, 4 classified. That's 1 certified, higher than the May forecast. And then in 21, 6 certified and 4 classified, and May wouldn't have had a fiscal 21, so that's all new.
So if I may, let me speak to 1819. So after the FERC meeting that Becky referenced, we sat down to go through the forecast, and these are just projections as placeholders. Part of the responsibility of giving you the 5-year forecast is to illustrate the best information we have today looking towards the future. So in our prior conversations, because I know it might get picked up, we've had discussion that this year, in the changes within the administrative staff and with me accepting the superintendency, I eliminated the former position, but left the door open that if this does not work, one of the positions that may be necessary in the future is a business manager. So that's what one of those placeholders is. It's called an administrator as a business manager. The other one that we've had conversations with amongst the leadership team, with the restoration of the curriculum division, specifically within the school district, there was conversation related to roles, functions, responsibilities for both the director of elementary ed and secondary ed for Dr. Hamilton and Mr. Emery. And part of that job function includes the coordination of testing, data, and accountability. So although we're focused on curriculum assessment and pedagogy, we also have testing, data, and accountability that has to happen within that realm. So we're doing what we're doing this year, but again, as I said before, leaving the door open that depending on how that all works out, it may be necessary to have additional staff based upon, quite honestly, the continuous improvement plan you're putting in place with the aspiration of the accountability of the outcomes that you expect for the future. So for us to get there, I have to have staff and resources in place to do that. So that's what this slide represents, is the direction for the future of where we expect to be as a school district and what staffing resources may, and clearly, please underline, may be necessary to attain that.
Again, with staffing, if it's not needed, we won't fill it. And those dollars just go back into the bottom line, which helps stretch out any potential future levy or offset costs into the future.
Do you have a round number in terms of per certified staff and administrator for cost annually?
I do. I don't know that it's spelled out in the forecast or in the notes. Let me look. I don't think it's. I can get it to you. New hires, so it's a total. So new hires in fiscal 18 is estimated at $958,000. New hires in fiscal 19 is $675,000. Fiscal 20 is $543,000. and fiscal 21 is $540,000. And that is in the notes. If you want them by classification, I can get those to you.
Okay, thank you.
So then that brings me, and this is a tough slide to see, I'm sorry, rate of increase for the expenditures. I know that the task force talked about that. The board has talked about that. And when you're looking at this slide, you can see a really large dip so in fiscal 12, you see a decline. That's where you had the steps that the unions had pared back. That hits, and then you see the increase in fiscal 13. That's where they start to come back with some new staff. Then in fiscal 16, last year, you see this really large decrease, the 5.5%, and that was when all of the RIFs hit our 5-year forecast. Then in the current fiscal year, you see 7.6% increase. So that's some new staff that we added back, but that's also that step that you saw coming back that started again in this fiscal year. Then you see that starts to level out. So you're 4.5% to 5% of a run rate with all of the staffing and all of those expenditures that we have in the forecast. So that's definitely something for the board to think about when you look back at some recommendations that were, between 2% and 3% depending on the CPI. So we've also talked about how far out do we project. We have to project 5 years out, but the forecast actually does go out 10 years. And so if I keep the expenditures at that 2.78% increase, so you can see it kind of flatten out towards the end, then you can see what happens to the ending cash balance. So we're really healthy this 5-year period. We have about, at the end of this 5th year of this forecast is about $3.9 million, $4 million as a positive ending cash balance. But if that run rate, if we're able to decrease our rate of increase to that 2.78%, then you're still spending more, and we do start spending more than we bring in fiscal 18, actually next year. But that continues going forward, maybe at a slightly lower rate. And if the 4.5% to 5% actually persists, then these are going to be even worse numbers. But you can see at the end of fiscal 21, we have a $54 million ending cash balance deficit. So to look out, this is if all things remain the same and you just get that expenditure rate down to about 2.78% and nothing new happens with real estate or with revenue. But the 5-year forecast right now, we do hit $3.9 million in fiscal 21. If you remember the board forget when that was, 2014, I think, or 15, passed a resolution that the first 3 years of the 5-year forecast should have at least a minimum 30-day ending cash balance, and anything less than that, then the district needed to take action. We either had to make cuts, we had to pass new revenue, or a combination of both. We don't hit the 30-day ending cash balance, lower than the 30 ending day cash balance until fiscal 21, which is the 5th year of that forecast. So, but I do think that we have to continue to watch this, because you can see if we don't do something with expenses, we're either going to have to make cuts at the closer we get, or go back and ask for more money from the voters.
What are the assumptions on student growth?
Student growth is just the enrollment projection report. So we hit that, the low side of that. We used those this time around instead of the moderate increases. So we did the low.
Becky, this forecast for the cash balance, that's based upon the growth rate assumptions in the previous slide?
Yes, that's assuming that once we get outside our 5-year period, that we're actually able to reduce our expenses, because they are starting to go down the rate of increase. So if we assume that we can get down to that 2.78%, 2 to 3% rate of growth, those ending cash balances are what happens. And again, assuming nothing changes with real estate.
And that previous slide is a 12-12 rate of change graph? Okay.
So talk to me about the real estate assumptions that are in here right now. Are we just assuming an increase in terms of property values, or are we assuming anything for new development?
New construction is what you'll see in growth. So property value increases on existing doesn't, am I not understand? Yeah. So property tax values on, when we have a reval or an update, that rolls back. So we're not receiving any new money for that, for existing values. So it's only the new construction. So when the abatements come off, they roll on as new construction. As we see homes being built, that goes on as new construction. We do see growth for that. So there is a growth rate in for new construction. And then as some of those abatements expire, then that's on top of some of those things now that I have values from the city.
And I guess my question is really around that new construction, that new value from new construction. Do you have just a growth percentage in there, or is it, how tailored is it to the community plan?
It's pretty much just a growth percentage. I talked with Chad Fuller at the city, and they don't have a way to parcel by parcel look at. They only have new construction certificates for so long into the future. So it's difficult outside of about a year and a half to know what's coming, to go 5 years out and have anything more definite than just a percentage.
So even for fiscal 17, for example, is that based on a percentage? Okay.
Well, when we had the discussion with Chad about those estimates, within a year and a half, there is more knowledge and there is refining that's done within that time period to try to get the estimate as close as possible. Is that correct? So you don't stay with a fixed percentage when you have reason to believe that it should be different. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I'm gonna make sure I understand that for fiscal 17, we're using a percentage or we're using
Fiscal
knowledge of the
17
community?
is, I think, I'll have to look back in my details. It's, I think, a $4 million growth estimate, which would coincide with what I have from the city.
Okay, and we can take it offline. I just want to make sure I understand. Going from 46 or 44 to 46, it's 2 million.
Right, and you're not going to take okay, so maybe this is what you're asking. It's not going to be a flat 1 or 2% because when the abatements roll off, they're not in every year and it's not the same value. So you're going to see an increase and decrease in the rate of increase.
So that $2 million increment, 16 to 17, is a combination of abatements rolling off and some percentage assigned to new construction.
In 17, it's closer to abatements rolling off and what I have from the city for new construction. So then going forward, it's more of a percent.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get to just how precise those numbers are. And so I want to make sure that I've heard you correctly. In the near term, 12 to 18 months, the precision is increased with information from the city as to what they expect in that short time period. And it's done on a per month basis, per quarter basis. Correct me if I have any of this.
Yeah, it's really, I don't update it quarterly. I'm updating it annually when I get those numbers from the city.
Okay. And then beyond that 12 to 18 month period, it's a flat percentage.
An estimate, right.
And where
Except
does
for abatements that roll off in some of those other years. So percentage plus, if I know what the value is of those abatements,
And we know when they roll off.
I've worked all of that in. So that's assuming the values that the city has stays true.
Okay, and that also assumes that those abatements roll off as expected, that there's no change in those that's negotiated with those parties.
Correct.
Exactly. And when we met with the city, Becky went through the numbers with Mr. Fuller, and she was within 5% based upon the projection of the actual data. So what Becky forecasted was within 5% of the actuals that Chad gave her for what was rolling off the abatement process. So the information was accurate. There's additional details in your 5-year forecast packet. So in this one, where she actually gives you the notes on page 7 and 8, that might also be helpful in looking at some of the explanation, because the real estate collection actually was up as well for 100% for calendar years 14 through 16. So Becky's gone through and updated all that information within the document.
Questions, comments?
So you say it goes out 10 years, and we can have that 10-year projection? Okay.
And I appreciate the fact that you have added the continuous improvement plan into the narrative of your 5-year forecast. So,
Because this is the first reading, we presume after you adopt it this evening, that will become incorporated.
Conversations.
But again, this is just the first reading of the forecast. It's not required to be adopted until the end of the month.
and tell us exactly what your timeline is and when you have to have this.
The forecast, the original forecast has to be approved and submitted to the state by October 31st each year. And then we have to do, unless there's a significant change in between that time, we have to do an update and have an updated version approved and submitted to the state by May 31st. But some version of this has to be sent to the state. It can change at any time after that. I personally would like it to remain fairly steady so that we have a good plan in place, but if we need to change it, we certainly can change it. This is the board's 5-year forecast, so if you do not like some of these assumptions, we can certainly change them, but Michael and I believe that based on his plan, the continuous improvement plan, that the assumptions in the forecast are reasonable.
So you'll be asking us to take action on this on the 24th
Yes.
of October. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Oh, no, I just want to say 2
question?
things. First of all, I thank you for the additional information, and I would love to, between now and next meeting, maybe just have a better understanding of how that process works with the city and how we project. I think that there is lots of questions in community as they see buildings going up, how well are we able to project, and that obviously makes a difference in the forecast if there's more revenue out there than we think there is. So appreciate your help with that. And then congratulations also on getting the EPA grant. Thank you for taking the bull by the horns and you and Linda running with that grant application. I know it's extra work and there's no guarantees that you get the funding, but thank you for doing that.
Thank you for the suggestion.
$104,000?
102.
102. That's a lot of money.
It's for a bus and a van.
Great.
I'll tell Michael about that next time.
No sandbagging allowed.
I can't guarantee that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And, just as Paul has mentioned, I'd encourage anyone else who has any questions to schedule time to sit down with Becky between now and the 24th. And we will be ready to approve, as she says, the board's 5-year forecast. And since we have mentioned the continuous improvement plan in the context of the forecast, I'd like to turn the podium back over to Mr. Sawyer so that we can continue and hopefully conclude our discussion about our continuous improvement plan.
Thank you, President Kohler. So I'm not going to go through every benchmark and indicator again. I incorporated them into the presentation at our last board meeting when we reported on the report card and the direction of looking forward within the school district. Since the last meeting, received a couple of editorial type comments for people related to format or spacing, but nothing substantive as far as content. So the content remains the same as you had seen it in prior communications from me related to the 7 benchmarks and the specific indicators for measuring purposes related to each of those to aspire within by 2021 to be ranked in the top 5% or the top 30 school districts within the state of Ohio with incremental growth each year. First year being the greatest lift with greater than plus or minus 2%, and then 1 year thereafter. So in year 1, we go to the top 9% and move from 64 to at least 54 or better within the state of Ohio to achieve that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have relative to the continuous improvement plan and or its adoption this evening.
Only have one question, and it's pretty much semantic in nature. The continuous improvement plan, is there a particular reason it's called that as opposed to simply goals and objectives for 2016, 2017 school year?
I think it's just semantics. So I think we can call it anything you want to call it. It will be translated within the school district as the goals for the 2016-17 school year. In the education world, right or wrong, CIPs, continuous improvement plans, are just part of the vocabulary that exists in schools. So most school districts, you can ask them, what are your goals, what are your objectives, or what is your continuous improvement plan? More often than not, they'll tell you they have a continuous improvement plan because the expectation is that you will continuously improve to get better. So I'm open to either.
And I don't want to make it a big deal. What matters to me is that it is explicitly clear that this is what we expect to achieve this year, right? And then the next year, there'll be another one, and that'll be what would be expected that year. So that, again, it's this clarity that this is it for this year. You can always do better, but that's it.
I think it's the will of the board.
I don't care.
Yeah, and I can leave it in your hands to
Yeah.
make sure that the clarity is
I will
there.
explain it.
I'm sure you will.
It will be clear. It's been fairly clear so far because I will be honest and tell you, staff members and parents within our community have watched the video of last board meeting, and I've received several comments. So people clearly understand the direction of what we're trying to achieve to increase student achievement and well-being across the school campus. So I think there is clarity.
Okay.
Are people generally supportive of, that's good.
It's been very positive. There's actually a very positive climate right now within the entire school community across the campus. There's just a positive vibe. And I know that sounds like, well, what is that? But there really just is genuinely a spirit across the school community, or school community, that's actually very positive. And I think this was very well received.
That's great.
I don't know if this is when you want to talk about it or not, but there was some, we talked in the past about looking at middle school electives. And
I actually was going to go there.
Oh,
So I was waiting to
okay.
see if there are any more questions about this. So I think Mr. Newmoff has one.
Just one question, and not so much of a question, but some of the feedback that I got, and I meant to mention this earlier, but there's nothing major here. I think one of the community members mentioned to me they liked the benchmarks. They thought they were really good. Of course, they're meant to be sort of 10,000-foot view. They had listened to it at the same time that they also were listening to the report out on the report card, and there were some challenges there, as we know, in mathematics. As you kind of look across, I can't remember, it was 5 through 10, or really you start to see that we've got some challenges there. So they're just looking for some more meat on the bone around, what specifically was being done to address that. And again, I know we had a very brief presentation. I have full confidence that we're all over it, we're working on it, but it, again, for a future meeting or for a future presentation, might be worthwhile to sort of articulate, what mathematics and what the game plan is going forward.
We're happy to provide that. I will tell you, just because we just met on it, that Dr. Hamilton's performance goals for 16-17, as well as the work that Mr. Emery's doing in the K-5 world, there is a deliberate focus on the mathematics curriculum, instruction, and pedagogy across the entire school campus. Specifically to your example, there was a disappointment with 7th grade in particular, and that's been unpacked to try to uncover and discover what specifically happened in 7th grade. And we made a reference to it in the presentation, and perhaps it wasn't abundantly clear to everyone when we did the report card presentation, but it's a celebration, but at the same time, a deficit, because the 7th grade students that were accelerated to algebra or geometry, 100% of them actually were proficient or higher. So every single student in 7th grade that took 8th grade geometry or algebra 1 for high school credit passed proficient or higher. The students in 7th grade that took the 7th grade mathematics test are grade level, typically developing mathematics students, and some of them struggled, both because they're on an IEP and or had LEP or were in a specific subgroup. So that's where I made the reference to in the presentation. about looking specifically at disaggregated subgroup data at the student level to understand where the growth was or wasn't. So just because they didn't pass the test, which is the indicator on the report card, doesn't mean that they did not make growth when we look at the individual student test data that actually becomes available this month for value added. So that's the growth element that we have to look at specifically to understand that. So we can report additional information in the future for it, but we are disaggregating and data mining mathematics right now, K through 12 within the school district. Pacing guides are being created, specific curriculum requirements are being put in place to understand what the standards are and what teachers are going to be held accountable to do to ensure kids are on grade level and at benchmark to basically achieve the outcomes we expect. But that is happening.
I assured them that it was, so you've clarified and provided more detail. Thank you.
So if anyone wants to have that conversation individually, I would invite people. They'd be happy to have a conversation with you. You can contact Dr. Hamilton for grades 6 through 12, Mr. Emery for grades K through 5, or the building principals, or the classroom teacher in math can happily answer that question for the parents. So if anyone in the community does have a specific question related to mathematics for his or her child, I would encourage them to contact an educator and let them have that conversation. It's great. All right. Mrs. Kohler referenced the K through or the middle school electives options committee, and it really aligns to this work, and it's kind of twofold in the respect that if you recall last spring and into the summer, and I think it's when you were still having board meetings in the Jefferson room, there was significant conversations related to middle school scheduling and the scheduling process and the elective opportunities that are available for middle school students in grades 6, 7, and 8 presently within the school district. We committed at that time of actually creating an elective option committee that would be diversified to be broad-based of parents, students, teachers, and community members that have an interest in talking about what elective opportunities should be available to middle school children and what ultimately can help them academically and developmentally have exploration as part of the middle school philosophy. So Dr. Hamilton and Mrs. LeBeau, the building principal at the middle school, have just kicked off. We sent out the staff invitation and the parent invitation and community to solicit committee representations or committee representatives to serve weekly, beginning a week from tomorrow through mid to late November. I think it's the last week in November, Dr. Hamilton, the last week in November, to explore this whole concept related to middle school electives. What should exist beyond the traditional, and that's what we're hearing from some parents, not that they don't appreciate it, but the traditional art, the options within music being orchestral, choir, or band, and then in the wellness capacity. What else should exist for kids? So we've just started the solicitation process to seek membership. We will diversify the committee and give everyone an opportunity to participate that has an interest base. Even beyond the committee, there'll be survey work that will happen to get feedback from parents within the school community, prior and or current or former or future middle school parents, as well as kids. So there will be parents, teachers, community members talking about what are the middle school electives to basically give opportunities to kids so that all can be incorporated into planning for 2017-18 when we get to registration by February, January, February, when that has to roll out. So we have to do that process now in order to figure out what the opportunities become for kids. And to that end, that's part one. Part two, and it kind of ties back to this total conversation. So there's some rumors floating, and I'm the type of individual that likes to put the rumors to rest and basically say what's fact versus fiction if there's something that we can respond to. So I was alerted this afternoon, late in the day, that there's a conversation going on within the school community related to my desire to reconfigure the school district and specifically look at which grade levels of students belong in which academic building across the school campus. So part of your charge to me upon hire was to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental needs for kids. So it's part of our responsibility, and it's really come to the forefront again in the last 2 weeks in conversations with teachers, because we're moving across the school district, unpacking the current data that's available for kids at the school level and at the classroom level by grade level, and what will soon become the student level when the next piece of data comes to the school district. So as we're disaggregating that data and having conversations, there's wonderful discussions going on with classroom teachers related to content, specifically related to curriculum, grade level bands, what the pedagogy or instruction should look like within the classroom, and how do we make sure we're meeting the needs of kids. So there's incredible conversations going on amongst the faculty and talking about pacing guides and ultimately how they're specifically teaching and what impact that's having to produce outcomes for kids. And why are Michael's results perhaps not as outcomes-based or high in the outcome associated to Mrs. Kohler. So if Laura's doing something better than Michael, then what is Laura doing and why is she doing it and how are kids responding to that? So we can learn from one another to benefit kids. So in those conversations, teachers have asked the question, well, is our current reality the best reality for kids? Are we going to take time to start talking about grade level bands? And what happened for the first time this year, because it's created a new conversation in the school district, we have grades 2 through 5 in 2 different buildings on the same school campus. Unlike other public school districts that have neighborhood schools where they'll compare results of one school to the other school, that's happening right next door with 2 buildings. Then the next question becomes, currently, grades 6, 7, and 8 will not all fit in the middle school. So we have middle school parents still saying, is my child getting the middle school experience when he or she is now in a different building? Because 1/4 of the new K through 12 learning facilities housing grades 6, 7, and 8. Then we also have in play at the K1 building, up until probably a month before school, had enrollment projections not changed for kindergarten, we would have been overcrowded and actually taken over the classroom adjacent to the library for a kindergarten classroom. So the K1 building is currently at capacity. So in that conversation, I'm raising the question, based upon recent conversations with staff, is it time to have a discussion within our school community about what's best for kids related to outcomes, and would reconfiguration, if any, have an impact? And what specifically would be the impact to increase student achievement and growth? I don't know, we haven't done the research yet. We haven't had the conversation. Teachers are starting the conversation about the benefits from a curriculum standpoint of looking specifically at grade level bands and what that could do to benefit kids, both in small group, cluster, and or cluster type groupings, specifically within core academic content. But there's a bigger conversation behind that. So you'll recall that we went through a very public process probably about 18 months ago related to bell schedules and the student start day and end day based upon changes that were then happening within transportation. I think a similar public process is necessary because when I was interviewing to become the superintendent of the school district in a couple of small groups, there were questions asked within the school community from parents about, well, what does the future look like? What's going to be different? I got questions about the 2-8 learning facility, which is technically called the K-12, but will it always be 2-8? Will other students get to access it? Why don't all kids get to access it? So I think there's a whole myriad of things that need to be looked at. And much like the middle school options committee that's currently being discussed related to electives, I think it's an opportunity, given what you're charging us to do in relationship to the continuous improvement plan or the goals and objectives and outcomes expected for the future, what do we need to do to better serve or meet the needs of kids? And it's part of our responsibility to look at all aspects of the school district, including, from my vantage point, the current grade level configurations within the school district related to specific buildings. So to that end, I believe a superintendent's committee comprised of teachers, staff, parents, and guardians needs to be established. I will put the framework together. I got hit with this afternoon. It is something I've had some preliminary conversations with related to cabinet members, my senior level leaders within the school district on the administrative team, but I haven't gone public with it. But it's coming up in grade level conversations and it's come up from parents. So there will be an opportunity for us to solicit broad-based input based upon specific data. I think we have to start with the data. What are the current numbers within the school district for students? How many kids are in which grade level? What are the current capacities of our school buildings? What's at capacity, what's not at capacity? How did it impact in our current serving of students in grades K through 8 when you look at the 2-5, The 2-5 building is currently not at capacity. The K through 12 learning facility is not at capacity for what it was built for. But the K1 building is presently at capacity. The middle school is presently at capacity, actually over capacity because we've taken over part of the new building to serve the middle school. So I think it's an opportunity if we start with the numbers, then lead into a conversation related to the challenge to determine which grade level configurations, if any, changes need to occur that would impact increasing student achievement and growth and well-being throughout the school district. So I have no predetermined outcome, but we need to go through the process, and the time is now simply because you can't wait till June at the end of the school year and say, okay, here's what we're doing. This is big. It's going to take lots of time to go through this process and publicly report on what we're doing, why we're doing, and what we're learning as part of that. I think the educators have a lead responsibility, including me within the school district, to present information to parents within our school community on what we find in the educational research related to specific grade levels, which configurations have research to demonstrate that they have higher levels of student achievement. That's the expectation that you put together in this continuous improvement plan. By 2021, you want to be in the top 5%. We have to look at, it's part of our responsibility, including me, what do we do to get to the top 5%? So in the context of the continuous improvement plan as a whole, I'm recommending that we form this committee. I will finish putting together the framework, but I didn't want to spring it on you outside of a board meeting and say, oh, by the way, here's something that I'm going to do. It fits within the context of tonight's conversation because of your aspiration of where we need to be by 2021. So to that end, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I promise it'll be a public, transparent process. We'll publicly share the information that we actually create, just like we've done in the past with the other committees that I've participated on. We'll solicit broad-based participation. My guess is people will come out of the woodwork, so I can't put 100 people. I need to put a diversification of the broad-based community that looks at aspects of the research done by educators that say, here's what we found that works best for kids that has proven outcomes. From there, react to it. Provide us your input, provide us your reaction to it, because everyone will have an opinion. We learned that in the Bell Schedule Committee. Everyone will have, Debbie's shaking her head. We went through lots and lots of trial and error to try to incorporate input and feedback, but grade level band configuration or which kids have access to what curriculum within a specific grade level band, you're gonna get it access-wise district-wide. But which grade levels academically, pedagogically, and developmentally belong together that incorporate this conversation about what's currently at capacity at the K1 and currently at capacity at the middle school. So I'm not saying anything's definitively going to change, but I think we have a responsibility to do the research to explore it. And I'm putting it in the context of the CIP.
I'm almost afraid to ask this question, but are you looking for board member participation in these committees?
There can be no more than 2.
Would you like 2 board members on each of these committees, or would you rather we're not in the process and you report back to us?
For the middle school electives, I think there is a benefit if someone has had or currently is experiencing the middle school as having children there. I think that that's an opportunity because you have a different perspective because you've been living it. For this other committee, I actually think it is absolutely necessary, much like the work that we did with understanding the research behind the Bell schedules and the impact of student start day, sleep time, all the sleep research that we went through. I think academically, there's an opportunity here, and I think it would be very beneficial to have a board member or 2, but there can be no more than 2, because then you form a quorum, and that's a no to participate. You don't have to decide tonight, but I want to tell you it's coming.
You see us all jumping.
The rumor is out there that Michael's been thinking about some stuff and had a conversation. So
I'm happy to volunteer for either one. Or both.
Michael, do you view this,
I didn't say that. Sorry.
Paul?
do you view this committee as primarily to look at the building configuration, or are you also, I hear you also say, consider revisiting bell schedules and
No, this is strictly,
Academic calendar.
well,
Don't
we'd
go
have to
there.
start with configuration. Now, there could be an outcome of that that then impacts bell time because you're changing building configuration. So it could lead to that, but that's not where we're starting. We're starting with which students should be together as grade levels or grade level bands in a specific school setting that may benefit them to increase student achievement, growth, and developmental outcome. That's the premise of where I'm starting, and the research behind what that looks like from an educator's perspective and the team that I will put together from the education perspective to share that. So from early childhood to really intermediate, it's primary, intermediate, and then middle school. I'm not talking anything, and so let's just be clear. I know people will like hear this. This is K through 8. I'm not looking to reconfigure the high school. Grades 9 through 12 are grades 9 through 12. We have almost 1,500 students there, and it's very, very busy every single day, but I'm not talking about grades 9 through 12. This is K through 8. And it could impact preschool. And Mrs. Saunders is sitting here. When I saw her, it just clicked. So I should say pre-K through 8 because the current preschool program within our school district, and I think this is something else for us to explore, is run through the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. We do not operate our preschool. That should also be explored. So pre-K through 8. Bell schedules, Paul, would be secondary based upon the work up to the committee.
Thank you.
Other questions or reactions?
I just think, I just want to lend my support to the work of each one of these committees, really. Both of them, I think it's interesting that the questions and the thinking is coming from staff, but it's also definitely coming from parents and community members as well. Even from the time that we had the new learning center, the 2-8 building on the ballot, we had many, many, many questions about what makes sense and which children should be in which building. And so I'm really pleased that this is happening. I'll just put a little plug in for that building too. It was designed to be very flexible. So I think that the building itself gives us permission to have some of these discussions. So,
Are there any configurations that are off the table in your mind other than incorporating the high school? Or is everything on the table?
I think anything is possible, but we need to do the research and find out what actually produces outcomes that benefit kids academically. So if there's already a body of evidence and research that illustrates here are models that have proven achievement levels for outcomes, then we need to look at those first and not just dream up a new system that has no empirical evidence or research to support it. So if there is something that actually already exists, then we need to start there, with the exception of high school.
And do we have any indication that we lack adequate facilities overall to serve the totality of our student population now and for the foreseeable future?
No.
Okay. So it's about reconfiguring to maximize student achievement and make best use of our existing facilities. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, that's an important point too, Phil, that you just raised. And so that people understand this is not preliminary to any ballot request or bond issue or anything else. It's doing exactly those.
How do we
two
utilize
things.
our existing resources to maximize student achievement? That's really the focus. And alleviate overcrowding, because we've used, I mean, we were very creative prior to the opening of the new building with grades 2 through 5 by using our annex on the second floor to house 5th grade, but actually using closet spaces that got converted to small group reading tutor instruction rooms because there was physically no space. And quite honestly, we would have faced this past summer if the enrollment projections had held true at moderate and we had continued to grow at the kindergarten level. We would have used spaces at the K-1 building that were not normally going to be a kindergarten classroom, and it could have had an impact on all-day K, because we would have had to go back to half-day K options first as a requirement to meet the needs of students if we ran out of physical space. So I think it's just forward thinking and looking towards the future. How do we maximize use of our existing resources? But more importantly for me, if there's another way that it's going to gainfully increase student achievement to better meet the needs of kids, we need to pay attention to it.
Or it doesn't hurt to make a change so that we better utilize facilities, right? Is it safe to assume that we could be looking, that one of the outcomes could be a non-traditional arrangement, something that is not done in too many other places but has evidence that it works and allows us to use existing facilities? Is that?
I think anything is possible as long as there's empirical research and data to support the impact on kids for achievement.
Who would be facilitating these groups?
I will,
Okay.
with Dr. Troyer and a few other friends will get to participate as well. But this will be a superintendent's committee, and Dr. Troyer and I will be responsible for it.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. We look forward to hearing more about it. It's time for public participation. Do we have anybody who has signed up to speak this evening?
Patrick's going to check.
Okay.
It's okay. They got asked, which was important.
No. We do not.
What, there's no one? Okay. All right, then let's move into the consent agenda items. And we are looking at superintendent's items A1 through B4. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President Kohler. Standard agenda items for you this evening. We had if you recall, in prior board agendas, a retirement within the finance department. So we've gone through the hiring process after justification for replacement and are recommending this evening that to happen on the agenda. We've had a couple other transitions within the school district for persons that are changing positions or job classifications. So they're also accounted for on your agenda for this evening for standard personnel action. Under the general business items, we do have the motion to approve the continuous improvement plan on the agenda for you this evening that we've spoken at length about during discussion, as well as a contract with Grady Benefits Consulting and Brokerage Services. We are changing the broker related to healthcare insurance within the school district based upon an RFQ process and the interview process that was conducted by the insurance committee within the school district. Ms. Jenkins and I support the change related to the broker services and are recommending a new contract with Grady that actually, from our perspective of everything we've found so far, increase services to the school district while decreasing the cost. So we see it as a win-win. You also have the opportunity this evening to approve the competitive bid process related to electricity. We are part of a consortium with Meta Solutions related to the purchasing of electrical services for utility purposes. We do go through a competitive bid process, current providers through Direct Energy, but we do have to annually approve the opportunity to go to market. So that bid process is actually in front of you this evening. And lastly is the territory transfer that was actually started previously at a Board of Education meeting. You'll recall there's parcels within the Columbus City School District that were requested to be transferred to the New Albany Plain local schools. That's gone through each individual Board of Education process, both with us and with Columbus Public, as well as the State Board of Education process to come back to Columbus Public to now come back to you. So this is the last requirement of the legal process to accept those parcels into the school district to be served by the New Albany Plain local schools.
And that's something that it's a very unusual action for us to take. I'm not aware that we've ever done this in the past, at least since I've been involved.
Not my tenure.
Yeah.
Can you give a 40-second summary of why that is?
There is a street that exists in New Albany that is split between the New Albany Plain Local School District and the Columbus City School District. And the way the land parcels are developed, wherever the house is built, the master bedroom determines which school district you're going to be serviced within. So 80% of your house might physically be on the New Albany Plain side, but your master bedroom is in the Columbus City Schools. Presently, it's served by the Columbus City Schools. So on this street, there are currently 3 of 8 parcels, I believe are the total, that belong to us that are served by the school district. These 5 parcels have yet to be built, and they're split literally depending on which floor plan you pick as to which school district you will be in. Now it will be official. The entire street will be the New Albany Plain Local Schools.
And those parcels are actually surrounded by New Albany Plain Local Schools, so it makes sense for both us and Columbus to transfer that property into the New Albany School District.
Based on the parcel size, do you expect after those homes are developed, that it will be a negative, a positive, or a neutral impact to the school budget based on expected tax revenue and number of students served?
Given the geographic size of the homes expected in the neighborhood, I believe it will be a tax benefit that will clearly outweigh the risk associated to the number of students that will attend.
Is this in High Grove?
No,
No, it's
it's on
Oxford.
Oxford,
It's in Oxford.
Okay.
part of Oxford.
Okay. If there are no further questions, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Kalinowski? Yes. Mr. Darrow?
Yes?
Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
President Kohler?
Yes, and that motion carries. And finally, I would like to make a motion, please, for an executive session, to enter into executive session as permitted by section 121.22G1 and 4 of the Ohio Revised Code for consideration of the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, evaluation, or compensation of a public employee, official, or student, and to prepare for, conduct, or review a collective bargaining strategy.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And could we have a roll call, please?
President Kohler?
Yes.
Mr. McClellan?
Yes.
Mr. Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski? Yes. Mr. Newmoff?
Yes.
And that motion carries. So we will adjourn to executive session.
Excellent.
When no action will be taken when we come back out of executive session. Thanks very much, everybody.